Hello, welcome to SOAS, the University of London. We're thrilled to see you, and we're very happy that you can be here to celebrate the Mboka Festival with us. And we are indeed very lucky and really honored to have with us the Ambassador of Gambia, whose full title is, she is the High Commissioner to the Court of St. James and the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. I've been practicing that on the train. And what that translates, I'll give you a translation of these terms in a minute, being the teacher that I am, and I'll introduce myself as well. She's the, because I've practiced, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the Kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the Republics of Austria, Ireland, Finland, State of Israel, and the Vatican City. So that's more states than there are days in a week. An ambassador represents the president and is and a plenipotentiary apparently represents the government and has the authority to act on behalf of the government. So she is all powerful. She has everybody's signature. It's like everybody's given her their bank card and said, "Here's my passcode. You do what you need to do." And so that tells us about how trustworthy she is. And she has an extraordinary career. And frankly, if I went through all her achievements, we'd be here for the rest of the evening. My name is Professor Banda. I'm a professor of law here at SOAS. And so when I was asked to introduce the ambassador, I was beyond thrilled because I have been a huge admirer of her and her work and her achievements for a very, very long time. And so I just wanted to share with you some of the things that have so impressed us all. She's a lawyer by training, and between 1987 and 2000, Dr. Bensouda, as she was successfully State Counsel, Senior State Counsel, Principal State Counsel, Deputy Director of Public Prosecution, Solicitor General, and Legal Secretary of the Republic, the Attorney General, and Minister of Justice in the Republic of Gambia. So that's just what she did at home. Her international career as a government civil servant, as a non-government civil servant, began at the UN International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, where she worked as the legal advisor and trial attorney before she rose to the position of senior legal advisor and head of the legal advisory unit, after which she joined the International Criminal Court in The Hague as the court's first deputy prosecutor. And it's interesting that she served in that capacity because she actually was a delegate for the Gambian government to the meetings where they actually drafted the statute or the treaty that became the International Criminal Court. That said, it then becomes even more impressive than that having been one of the drafters of this phenomenal treaty, she then became the chief prosecutor. And so she was the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court between 2012 and 2021, where they had at least 14 investigations, and these are really technically complex. And it says something that she was the first woman to have ever been prosecutor, chief prosecutor, and she remains the first woman to have been chief prosecutor. She was nominated without any opposition, so by the African Union, and she served us all as Africans. I'm Zimbabwean, with enormous, which she gave us enormous pride. And I suppose her crowning achievement in terms of trying to assess the work that she did at the ICC was the fact that in 2021, Professor Dr. Ambassador Plenipotentiary, I'm enjoying this, Bensouda was one of the people nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. What they were nominated for was in recognition of their accomplishments and work in advancing international criminal justice without fear or favor. And if you understood how much political pressure is brought to bear, it takes somebody with a back of steel to resist. Countries that haven't ratified telling you to prosecute other people, countries that have ratified saying they're not going to help you, and everybody and their mother having an opinion about how you should be doing things and how they could be doing things so much better. So for me, the fact that she's here with us just speaks to an enormous kind of character and will. And so the last thing, and there are many other achievements that I could share with you, but I also wanted you to hear from the ambassador herself for a minute, so I don't have to keep telling you. I know how to say plenipotentiary. And so in 2012, she was also nominated as Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in the World, and a New Africa magazine as one of most influential Africans, Foreign Policy as one of the leading global thinkers, and by Jeune Afrique as one of the 50 African women who, by their actions and initiatives in their respective roles, advanced the African continent. And for somebody who, like me, teaches human rights of women, it moves me deeply that one of the things that she made sure to focus on at the International Criminal Court was gender-based violence and also focusing on sexual violence against women, because these are things that can often be forgotten. She was, and I have to say this because I've been practicing my French as well. This is the last one I promised that I'm showing off with. And these are not even my achievements. So prior to her mandate becoming a prosecutor of the ICC, she was awarded l'Ordre National du Lion du Sénégal by the President of Senegal for her dedicated service in the advancement of international criminal justice. And the Gambia has also given her the highest civilian honor. And there's a whole, PhD that I could do on her achievements, but I particularly am deeply, deeply thrilled and so moved that you're here with us. And so we welcome you and we invite you to the stage. And thank you. Oh, and thank you to Khadija and the crew for organizing this.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was very kind. Introduction. I would like to, first of all, thank you all, and good evening to all of you. I'm very grateful to Mboka and the organizers of this festival, as well as to SOAS for kindly hosting this, this very, very important festival on a very important issue, and that is to do with culture and to do with cultural heritage. It's an opportunity for me to just make a few remarks on this, what I call the very existence in life, that is cultural inheritance. In my former life as ICC prosecutor, fighting for the preservation of cultural heritage, I once said that cultural heritage constitutes a unique and important testimony of the culture and identities of peoples, and the degradation and destruction of cultural heritage constitute a great loss to those communities which are directly affected, as well as to the international community as a whole. It is the repository of the human experience throughout the ages. To protect it is to pay homage to the basic fabric of civilization and civilizational practice. And personally, I think culture is extremely important. Cultural heritage I consider to be the identity of a people, the history of a people, the memory of a people. And I consider it, as I am sure you all do, as an inheritance that should be passed on to generations coming. It is a fact that future generations look to history and culture to really identify themselves, to know what are the reasons that perhaps even certain actions are taken by their predecessors. So it is very, very important, whether it is looking back or going forward. It is indeed something that is really critical to a person's identity. I am a Gambian, proudly so. I am an African, also proudly so. And I do inherit a culture like all of us that are present here today. And focusing for a moment on my continent, we find that Africa is a very diverse continent. You see in Africa several cultures that may sometimes be varied, but you also see the interconnections in these various cultures across Africa. For instance, depending on the occasions, and perhaps a sad occasion of, let's say, a death, or maybe a joyous occasion of weddings and christening ceremonies, We find, for instance, masquerades and music playing a very big role in the African culture. I think it crosses the continent that we express our feelings, our state of mind in these ways. We express it through music. We also do it in other ways. For instance, in the beliefs that we have, the history that we have, maybe the way that we dress for different occasions. I recall growing up in the streets of Banjul and being particularly intrigued by these very masquerades, such as the Kankurang. I recall following them around with many of my mates and dancing to the accompanying music of Famara Awalni. Banjulians will identify with that. And so did many, many other teenagers and adolescents from all across Banjul and its surroundings. And I therefore believe that it is the duty on each and every one of us to keep it alive, to preserve it, and be able to pass it on to the generations coming. So it is really an important aspect for me, and it is critical that we should try to preserve this culture, whether at the national, and here I also talk about the international level. We have a duty, we have a responsibility to preserve what we have inherited and also to be able to pass it on. Because culture has been so important for all of us. I think this informed the forming of the UNESCO when UNESCO was established in 1954. And this was the world, really the world realizing that this is an important aspect of our lives, of our beings, of our identity. And it is important to show that it is not only one community or one country or one region that inherits culture, whether it is the buildings, whether it is the sites that we see, the arts, in the music, and this has, over the years, been particularly very important to all of us. But there was the realization that it is important, and I keep talking about the preservation of the culture, and that it has become a heritage for humankind, not just for that community, not just for that country we're talking about, but for humankind, and it is important to preserve it. For instance, again, I talk about my life at the ICC. I did see the urgent need to act decisively to protect cultural heritage in times of war and conflict. And this drove me, as an initial step, to produce a policy on cultural heritage, mindful that willful attacks on cultural heritage are a pervasive feature of conflict, and drawing upon the preamble of the Rome Statute, which establishes the criminal code, I recall that all peoples are united by a common bond. Their cultures piece together in a shared heritage, and this delicate mosaic may be shattered at any time. I led my office to successfully bring charges relating to cultural heritage in September of 2015 in the case of Al-Mahdi, emanating from my investigations into the situation in Mali. The accused was found guilty by the judges of the ICC in September 2016, and the office equally brought relevant charges in another case called the Al-Hassan case. But both these cases, I mentioned them because it recognizes the importance of also investigating and prosecuting crimes against or affecting cultural heritage. And it was through this policy that my office was able to commit to continuing to do these investigations in all cases across situations under investigation where, of course, the evidence would support the charges in accordance with its mandate. And I recall that in welcoming the policy then, the Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Audrey Azoulay, stated that the protection of cultural heritage under international law is also an integral part of the peace building and lasting peace. All efforts to strengthen the protection of cultural heritage in line with the values of the United Nations and UNESCO are therefore also very important. But before I get carried away with my previous work, let me once again thank you. Thank you for this invitation, and at the same time commend you for and on behalf of the government, and indeed on my own behalf, in view of the importance I attach to this, and on behalf of the High Commission and staff, especially for the efforts and the initiatives that you are taking in the preservation of our culture. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. It's not good enough for me. Good evening, everybody. Okay, I would like to thank the Honourable High Commissioner for that wonderful introduction. My name is Amapoku, and I am a member of staff here. I work in the library. And this festival is being put on as part of a Hidden Histories series, which is actually less than a year old. A small group of us, all women, because women are the drivers in the world. Remember that? A small group of us, one of whom is here, my colleague Fazana, Angelica, who's actually in Africa at the moment, another colleague, Ludi. We're part of a decolonising group in the library. And we have a passion for sharing some of those histories that are not often talked about, not often mentioned, because we believe that all peoples have history, contribute to history, and all children of the future have a right to know the histories of the world. No one people's or no one histories is more important than others. And so today we are absolutely enthusiastic about celebrating the history of a part of the world called Africa, and specifically Gambia, but Masquerade actually permeates all of Africa and beyond. So I'd like to introduce the director, my friend. We go back a long way. Khadija and I went to university together.
A few years ago.
Many years ago. It's about 5 years ago. No joking. So so we had a bit of a gap where we hadn't seen each other for a while, and then paths crossed. I'm just illustrating that to just say how the world is actually a big place but also a small place. And so I'd like to encourage everybody to enjoy this evening's event, listen, learn, contribute, but the thing I really want to encourage everybody to do most of all is, if we keep our histories in small boxes and on laptops and whatever, it's of no good. We, all of us, have a duty to ensure that we share the histories with those who are not in the room, those who are not in the academies. And to illustrate that, look what I brought along. I also work in a public library on a Sunday. A little book here.
What's it called? Mayowa
and the Masquerades, which is in the children's library. So when I go back, sometime in the next few weeks or months, I'm going to actually read this to a group of children in the library so that they learn and understand about masquerade and the importance of culture, which we all are part of, which we all contribute, and is constantly being shaped. So as we are speaking, there are young people and children out there reshaping culture. Afrobeats, to talk in the language which my or music which my children listen to. So please, you're very much welcome. Enjoy. Come to future events which we host in SOAS, and we'll mention them towards the end. And do share whatever you learn and you pick up today with family, friends, colleagues, anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you once again. We're just really proud to have Her Excellency Dr. Fatou Bensouda here with us this evening. It's such a real joy, and really appreciate your taking the time to be here. So I'm just going to go straight into things, and just to kind of let you know that I was one of the founders of Mboka Festival, which started in 2017 in the Gambia. We had a 1-week-long festival. I'm in the literary field, so most of it was literature, anything literature and storytelling related. I made sure that was most of it. We let in bits of everything else. And we had a special guest at the time who came because we agreed to translate one of his stories into 3 Gambian languages, and that was Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He came at a very sensitive time of what was happening in the Gambia, and people thought, oh, this is amazing, Khadija. It's so sad that you're going to have to not have the festival. We said, of course we're having the festival. There are people still staying in the Gambia, and we're going to have the festival for them. And he proudly wore his T-shirt, Gambia has decided, and mingled with the children on the street. He loved it, even though the American embassy were calling up saying, send him home. He said, I'll go home when I'm ready to go home. And he stayed. And we just thought that was a great example, especially of Pan-Africanism and everything. So we are really appreciate him for doing that. So the festival is in the Gambia. It takes over a certain number of days, but after the pandemic, we decided to revise things a little bit, which is why we've broken it down into different kind of events throughout different countries. And this is one of those events that we're doing. And so we're really pleased to be doing this with SOAS and to unpack and discover some hidden histories that actually run throughout the continent. So first of all, I'm going to invite to the stage to speak to you Professor Jibril Fall, OBE. Professor Jibril Fall is the co-founder and director of GK Partners, specializing in socially responsible business models, sustainable development and program implementation. Just know that whatever I'm reading of a bio is really probably about 1% of what is in these people's bios, because they're just amazing. We have got an amazing group of people here this evening. So I'm going to jump to the end of even the short bit of the bio because I want him to come onto the stage. And basically he is going to be talking to you about his new book. This is a special preview that nobody has had yet. So these are the kind of things I demand. So that's what I demanded for Ngugi. Yes, you have to come to the Gambia if you want me to translate your stories. And now we have here Professor Jibril Fall. His forthcoming book is on Gambians in the United Kingdom, 1820 to 2020. Can you imagine? That is how long Gambians have been here for. So I am handing over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khadija, Your Excellency, friends and colleagues. If you were walking the streets of London or Manchester in the 1950s, and you met somebody who you thought was a Gambian, you didn't need to know his or her name. You will just call him or her Mboka. Mboka literally means in Wolof relative. But relative in Wolof and many Gambian cultures means both blood and social relative. So you can see it's beyond just a literal definition of relations, but an entire concept. And we would see how the evolution of the Gambian diaspora in the United Kingdom rested significantly on this concept of Mboka or Mbokaya. During COVID, we in the UK, as we all know, we had a proper lockdown. And I was amongst those who really had to do it the hard way, that is not even having to leave my house for months on end. And of course, for everyone's sanity, you needed a sort of distraction. And a nice distraction for me was to put together data and material I'd gathered over the years about Gambians in the UK, and then undertook further research to produce a manuscript, which hopefully it would be published, hopefully by the end of the year. So today we'll just give you a sort of taster of what the book is about and some of the things it covers. It covers the different migratory patterns and pathways of Gambians to the UK. With this idea of Mboka and social networks, it looked into socio-economic profiles of the migrants and also looked at how Gambians in the UK over 200 years had actually connected back with the Gambia. And apart from general literature review, we dived into the data from the Office of National Statistics and Home Office to really understand the movements. We were counting effectively the Gambians. We were counting them in to the country and as much as possible counting them out to sort of have good data on the numbers over a period of 100 years. I also then used another methodology, which is only relatively recently we've had access to, and it's becoming more important in academic research, and that is the use of data both for passenger lists on ships as well as genealogical data, registers of births, marriages, and deaths. Because using certain Gambian names, we would then be able, through the data, to look at where people are over a long period of time. And indeed, I had the opportunity to interview many of the older Gambians who live in the UK, some of them having arrived in the 50s, and had a recollection and engagement with people who had arrived in the 1930s. In brief, we suggest that the epochs of Gambian migration to the United Kingdom fall into these particular dates. I take 1820 for a particular reason, we'll see in a minute. But of course, the presence was earlier than 1820, but 1820, it's a good date. So we see the first wave of 100 years where seamen, stowaways, and students. And followed from 1920 to 1970, over 50 years, with a higher number of students coming, but the seamen and the stowaways were still coming. The stowaways are still coming. We now call them irregular migrants. Then, of course, it was only in the 1970s, after republic status, the Gambia, partly part of this festival today is partly to celebrate the Republic Day of the Gambia, which was 24th of April, 1970. Then you began to see new phenomenon whereby people were coming not particularly to study, but to come to find work to stay. That started in the 1970s. And by 1995, you then found a new phenomenon, that is refugees and asylum seekers, because in July of 1994, we had a military coup d'etat and the start of a dictatorship. Prior to 1995, there were, I can confirm, 2 Gambians who were given refugee status in Gambia. I'm told that it's 3, but the 2 I am absolutely sure of because I know them. Prior to 1995, that was the situation. Now, we'll see why 1820 is important. So why did the Gambians come to the UK? Of course, the answer as to almost virtually everybody who comes to the UK is because the UK went to them, or the English to start with went to them. But the relationship in legal terms between Gambia and the United Kingdom really is the 3rd of May, 1588. So as we all remember, in the 15th century, the Pope had divided the world into 2 parts and gave it to Spain and Portugal. So the European presence in Gambia was mainly, from the 15th century onward, was mainly Portuguese. Even this connection to England, you saw the Portuguese there. Because Antonio of Crato, who was a pretender to the throne in Portugal, of course lost out to Philip II, and he was an exile in the UK. And he, in his businesses, he then claimed authority on the western coast and was giving out mandates for business to the coast. He became very indebted, and the money he owed it to English merchants, and then he transferred that authority, which the Privy Council accepted, and on the 3rd of May, 1588, Elizabeth I issued letters patent to the English merchants for the space of 10 years, at the same time forbidding any others of her subjects to trade to those parts, being Gambia. So that was a 10-year monopoly. So lots of things happen, and competition between the European powers in the western coast. But what we now know as Gambia, in terms of the boundaries of the Gambia, really started 1783 at the Peace Treaty of Versailles. Of course, later it was modified in 1889 with another treaty, but effectively you're going to 1783. And for that, we have the specific articles, I'll show them to you in a minute, that define that. So 1820 is important because Gambia formally became part of the British Empire on the 17th of October 1821. That having resulted with the settlement of Banjul in 1816. Banjul was settled, so the trading Royal African Company and all of the other British trading companies, their interests were all taken over by the Crown, the United Kingdom Crown. And of course, by the time you have government administration, it was easier to bring the Gambia, or that territory of the Gambia, to under the colonial ambit, as it were. And that was the Act of Parliament of 10th July 1821, but we officially became a colony 17th October. Of course, on the 18th of February 1965, Gambia became independent, and 24th April 1970, we gained Republican status. So the Treaty of Versailles, so it says, the definitive treaty of peace and friendship between His Britannic Majesty and the Most Christian King, signed at Versailles the 3rd of September 1783, in the name of the Most Holy and Undivided Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, so be it. Article 9, the King of Great Britain cedes in full right and guarantees to His Most Christian Majesty the River Senegal and its dependencies, and the forts of St. Louis, Podor, Galam, Anguic, and Potentic, and His Britannic Majesty restores to France the island of Gorée, which shall be delivered up in the condition it was in when the conquest of it was made. And crucially, so Britain was giving up most of its interest in Senegal and saying, this part of Gambia, leave it to us. And that's Article 10. That is, the Most Christian King, that's the King of France, on his part, guarantees to the King of Great Britain the possession of Fort James, which is now Kunta Kinte Island, and the River Gambia. So effectively, the boundaries of Gambia is effectively 15 miles on either side of River Gambia. So if we look at then those periods, pre-1918, what I've done in profiling it and telling the story is also try to illustrate it through the people, because we've counted the people in numbers to know who came in and who wasn't here, but also try to understand who they were and the lives they had. Of course, the earliest one we can find is, most of you would perhaps recognize this picture. This is Ayuba bin Suleiman Jallo. In England, he is known as Job ben Solomon. And Job ben Solomon, we happen to know a lot about him because he was a slave scholar. He was a slave who found himself in America, and but he himself, I've been doing a lot of work about him for many years, starting in 1988. Fascinating character, but I don't like him. But he's a fascinating and important character. He was a well-educated man, an Islamic scholar, but he was also a slaver. He used to buy and sell slaves. And he fell into slavery himself. And he found himself in the United States a slave. And he wrote a letter to his father. And effectively, he's like a spoiled child. He's saying, effectively, these so-and-so guys found me and bought me and sent me off, and now in slavery. Please pay some money to these Europeans so that they will free me. He wrote that letter, and the letter, of course, was in Arabic, was intercepted and ended in the hands of Captain Oglethorpe. Oglethorpe later became the founder of the state of Atlanta. But Oglethorpe was intrigued by a slave writing a letter. Long story short, the letter ended up at Oxford for the Arabics to translate it. And they had the sense that this was not only an ordinary writer, but a well-educated writer. So his passage was facilitated to England. He was a bit of a celebrity in England. In the news in the past few days, there's the story of Sir Joshua Reynolds' painting of Omai from Tahiti. But in fact, this portrait of Ben Solomon by William Hall was over 50 years earlier, because this was in 1734, I think. These sketches of this existed. I had a copy of this in 1988. At the time, it was thought that the painting was lost forever. And it was, I think, in 2011 or 2012, that suddenly it entered the market. And I had the privilege to work with the National Portrait Gallery to try to keep it here. You won't see it in the picture, but I remember when I went to a private viewing and the curator was showing me, they thought that the painting needed cleaning because there were blemishes elsewhere. Then when you examine it, the biggest blemish was actually on his forehead. So we had to tell them that it was not a blemish. It was a mark of years of praying as a Muslim, the sujood. So the prayer with your finger, that's what the mark was. It wasn't a blemish. But here it is. We have Job Ben Solomon. We know of all of his lives, the places he went to in London and outside of London as a Gambian in town, as it were. I've just selected a few stories given the time limitation we have. We have later the case of George Edward Doney, who we also know to be Gambian. And he certainly came in as a slave and later had his freedom and was highly valued in the household he worked. When we read some of these texts, the language is, to put it mildly, politically incorrect, but it is of its time. And his former master and later his boss, his employer, when he died, he had a proper burial and a headstone, which still stands. It's in Watford. It's in a church in Watford, St. Mary's Church. And they wanted to write good things about him. We today may not think it was a good thing, but this is what they wrote about him. They say, poor Edward blessed the irate bark that bore his captive infancy from Gambia's shore, to where in willing servitude he won those blessed rewards for every duty done. Kindness and praise, the wages of the heart, none else to him could joy and pride impart, and gave him, born a pagan and a slave, a free man's charter and a Christian grave. That's what they said of him. But even perhaps better, his obituary was published in a gentleman's magazine. And this is what it said. So he had a formal obituary that at Cashiobury, the seat of the Earl of Essex, George Downey, a black servant and native of Virginia, of course, Virginia, that's where he was first sold, who from the year 1766 remained in the families of the late and present earls. He discharged the duties of a faithful and honest servant, acquiring the friendship of those of his own station, whilst his respectful attention and demeanor conciliated the universal good opinion of all those who had opportunities of witnessing his services. One other thing I want to say about Job Ben Solomon, he ended up returning to Gambia, and we tracked him a little bit, then we couldn't find him in the history books anymore. But when he returned, his father had sent people to the North Bank to meet him. By that time, his wife had remarried and all of it. So they were asking him, Suleiman, Ayuba, where have you been? And his response was, he said, I have come from whence no fuller man has ever yet returned. That's what he told them. Still, before 1820, just some of the Gambians here, again, we had a servant lady who was known in the books and all of the records simply as Chloe Gambia, as using Gambia as her surname. In 1767, she was 7 years old and was brought to the household of Henry and Catherine Hervey in Cheshire, having been bought at a slave auction in Liverpool. She lived there for 70 years, working as a housekeeper. She died of breast cancer in 1838 and was buried at St. Peter's Churchyard. I included that bit as to what she died of, because that's important. She was valid enough for records to be kept about her status and what happened to her health. Historic England tells us that at first she was a playmate to the children, then she was a servant before eventually becoming the family housekeeper, meaning the highest ranking female servant in the household. So in the next period, which is 1820 to 1920, again, I've put a couple of sort of illustrative case studies. First is Joseph Egerton Single. The history books in Africa, if you will hear about Joseph J.E. Single, but everyone knows him as a Nigerian because he was the president of the first political party registered in Nigeria in 1923. In fact, he's Gambian. We can tell that by 1892 he was in Nigeria because he was enrolled to the Supreme Court there. But with him, he went to school in Gambia and then finished high school in Sierra Leone, went to Forabe College before coming to England. He came to England in 1889 and went to Christ College, University of Oxford. He didn't graduate, but he then came to London and went to law school. And I think officially he is the first Gambian lawyer. Many people think would generally suggest that it might be Sir Samuel, but no, it is Single. Only that Single didn't stay in Gambia. He was called to the bar in 1888. And by 1892, we've seen him in Nigeria because the court system was not developed. So because he didn't practice in Gambia, so that is why he is not known. The next in the profile between 1820 and 1920 is Sir Samuel Foster, who many people think is the first Gambian. But we also have very good records of him because he's from a very privileged family. He started school, Wesley Boys in Gambia. Joseph Single, I think, went to St. Mary's in Gambia. But Foster went to Wesley, then went to high school in Sierra Leone and came over to England. He went to school first in Wales, then in Liverpool. But interestingly, we then see him going to Abingdon School. Abingdon is a very old and prestigious public school, tracing its origin way back to the Abingdon Abbey of AD 675. And it is from there that he took his entrance exams to Oxford and went to Merton and graduated from Merton College. And I was able to access the school books, the school magazines of Abingdon College. And he is featured in at least 2 editions during the time he was there, 1892, 1893. And one of them actually had his photograph. So he's the black boy there in the cap, and he was the captain of the football team. But if you read the text, it actually made no reference of a black or African student. It made no reference. It just mentioned Samuel Foster. So you wouldn't have known until it happened that fortuitously that photo was there. Then I have some examples of these, that period of the different people we've been able to track. So we begin to then see the government workers, civil servants or clerks coming in. This one is actually, I've picked it out because that's my great uncle, Usman Jai. I think there's now a road named after him in Banjul. But we can see him in 1925 and then many times over those years coming. And he was a carpenter at the Public Works Department. And now I understand, because I was intrigued to see that his address in England was the Royal Zoological Society, which is effectively London Zoo. What was it? I have found that the reason was the idea was to build cages for some of the animals and to do transfers, the idea of developing a sort of zoo in Gambia, and he was being sent many times to learn how to build cages for these animals. So I know the time is short. We have very many other illustrations of this. This is an example of how the passenger ship lists are important, because we can see the people on and they describe what they're doing. If you don't have an address, like these kids who were on it, they were stowaways. So it actually says stowaways, and their names are given. Babukar Gassama, this is what in 1948. Babukar Gassama, Jibril Njai, many other Keba Sow. And in some cases, you can actually track them as to what happened to them. Some of them, you later see their names working as seamen on different ships, because when they come in, they would be given jobs, as it were. I would pick out 1 or 2 others because of time. This one is students. I've picked this one out because it's got the names of 2 students. On the 16th of October, 2 students are coming to the UK. Why are they important when we're talking of a diaspora? Because those days, when people come as students, they tended to stay between 6 to 10 years. It was very long. So one of them was a young man called Sehu Almami Jawara, and he would stay from 1948 to 1954. Of course, he would later be David Kwesi Jawara, and then Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara, the first president of the Republic of the Gambia. And his colleague and friend at the time was Cherno Ibrahim Janj, who in Gambia is known as C.I. Janj. He later became the administrator of Banjul Town Council, which is the now Banjul City Council. He was the clerk of the town council. So, fascinating story for another day when the book is published. But I'll just give 3 more slides, Khadija. 1, she says 1. And one of the most fascinating guys I found is who had an effect in 2 aspects of British cultural life. One, the nightclub industry of Soho, and the other is the greyhound racing tracks across England. So on the 16th of June, 1946, one of the greyhound dogs broke the 29-second record. It does these races are based on a dash. One of the lengths is 525 yards. And no dog before had ran below 29 seconds. And on that 16th June, 1946, a dog called Bass Choice broke the record. It was owned by a gentleman who all the records said that he's described as a West Indian nightclub owner. He was no West Indian. He was Ndongo Banjul. His name was Iliman Wakaba. In fact, his father was the Imam of Banjul, and his brother later became the Imam of Banjul. So he was a dandy and a man about town, and in making money, lots of money in greyhound racing. And he ran a club called the Buya Bears on number 6 New Compton Street, Soho. Afterwards, he got his own license, and that club was called the Fuladu Club. And he was known as Alec, and people call him Smart Alec. There's a book by a gentleman called Ernest Mark called Old Man Trouble. And Ernest Mark was born in Sierra Leone in the early 1900s and has a fascinating story. And he wrote his story, and he had a whole chapter on his life in Soho. And he referred to Alec, Smart Alec, and tells the whole story of the Fuladu Club. But he didn't name Eliman. Of course, I've been able to find from the records that it's Eliman, and we've found lots more. I'm sorry we don't have time to go beyond what? We're still in the 1930s, 1940s. But what we've done is track the story all the way to 2020 of the fascinating lives of Gambians in the United Kingdom. Thank you very much.
You know, I'm not really sorry we had to cut. It just means to say that when he does the full day event at LSC sometime later on in the year, that you'll attend that. So that's a good thing. And also, it's interesting that some of those stories that came out, some people may have heard of the project, The World Reimagined. If you go onto the World Reimagined website, you will discover some of Gambians there as part of that project in the history of Africans in the UK. So that's also something very fascinating to go to. So thank you very much for that, Jibril. And we didn't even get to the bit where he kind of talks and brings in the whole aspect around what is happening with Masquerade as well. Again, so you've got more lovely discoveries for that. We are going to be watching a film next, which will kind of talk a little bit about the history of Masquerade in the Gambia. And it's about 15 minutes long, and then we will take a break. So rather than me kind of tell you about lots of Mboka events, please pick up the program, and we've got some events going on, not just in this country, but also in the Gambia as well. So please pick that up, and you can also contact us for further information. So now I'll just hand it over for you to watch what is going to be a very short, tight, beautiful, fascinating film. And thank you again, Jibril. Thank you.
Masking traditions play an important role in traditional rituals and ceremonies in the Gambia. They serve various purposes in the society. Some of the roles depend on the ethnic groups, the events they appear in, and at times when they are needed as ceremony. The most common masquerades in the Gambia are Zimba, Kankurang, Hunting, the Fairy, Esamai, and Kumpo.
Masking or Kankurang is a way of life in this community, and it is embraced by almost everyone that resides within this community. So basically, masking is an intangible product that seems to be part of our life. So we live it all together.
uncircumcised boys, when they are at the boys' school, they are always chased by the evil spirit, because they believe that, this evil spirits, when they kill this young initiative, they will be a champion, a king in their society. So that's why this Kankurang masquerades will come and make sure that these children are protected. And also, they also do entertainment for people during our ceremonies time also.
Three types of Kankurang, we Mandinkas. The first one, we call it Wula Wula. That's the dangerous one. Some of them call it Famboni. That one, it never closer to women. It always be at the bush when we have circumstances. Also, we have another Kankurang that we call Jamba Jabali. That is an entertaining Kankurang.
Safeguard the interests of the society by promoting culture and tradition, and also it promotes heritage of the intangible history of culture and the Maxim tradition. Important tradition of the Maxim is that it brings a unification in the community, and also it unifies trust building.
Region here, especially in the Gambia, most of the ethnic groups locally all have their masquerades that normally represents them in the various festival grounds here in the Gambia. So when you come to the side of the Mandinka people, where the Kankurang is from, normally they organize what we call circumcision of boys. This is a retreat of boys who will be in the forest for about 2 months or more. And then this is where the Kankurang plays a very, very significant role to serve as a protection, to keep and guide all the newly circumcised boys, to keep them safe away from all evil spirits. And also the Kankurang is there to develop these newly circumcised boys to become more responsible in the future. What they learn in their stay in the bush school is about rustling, hunting, tree climbing, stories, and many other activities, which is also where the elders of this community can select their future leaders who can represent them in the near future.
Important part of being part of a community and being part of something you can call where you come from and where you identify yourself from. What I've seen today here is that there's a lot of culture and knowledge as well being transported from all these masquerades here. So they see who they are, they know that they belong together of this community. I think it's really beautiful to see it up close and to really experience it. And even for me, I am able to participate and to learn about the cultures here and the masks here, and I think it's really beautiful.
Masking traditions connote the mysticism of our cultures, how our cultures were associated with paranormal forces, the abnormal abilities, which the masquerades, possess. The masquerades played a role in social control, and they also helped to communicate messages, to the communities. And the masquerades also help to celebrate diversities, in our communities, because almost every community or every group have a masquerade. Some are well known, like the Kankurang. Some are lesser known, but nonetheless, each community has like a masquerade, which it uses, for various purposes. NCAC is the government department charged with the promotion, the protection, and the interpretation of arts, culture, and heritage in the Gambia, both the tangible cultural heritage and the intangible cultural heritage. Our biggest achievements are, one, we have revived the Kankurang Festival, in Makati, which is now an annual festival, which was revived in 2018. And so far, we have had 6 editions where the Kankurang masking tradition in particular and other masking traditions in the Gambia are displayed during a 2-day performance of street carnival, and we were able to establish the Kankurang Center in 2016. And earlier in 2005, the Kankurang was listed as a UNESCO intangible, cultural masterpiece of humanity. And now another, achievement we have done has to do with the revival of the Banjul Egere Night. In the new year, every year now, all the urban masks in Banjul, as you can see them here, the ferry, the hunting, the bondo, the Zimba, are all on display. And thousands of people come to witness this event at the I-22 grounds. Some of these masking traditions are not well known now, like the female Kankurang. It was associated with animism, and now that everybody claims to be a Muslim or a Christian, those masquerades have died out. Some were associated with harvest, but now that there is a lot of decline in these sectors also, some of these masquerades have disappeared. But what we are encouraging is these community festivals. If we continue to celebrate these masquerades, as we are doing with the Kankurang, with the hunting and so on, and that will help to preserve them. Because one way of preserving this, tradition is basically to showcase. We showcase, we document. Because whenever there's a masking, festival, people come, they take pictures, they document it. That is one important way of archiving, the masquerade. Because as times go, these masquerades are not static. But through the documenting and the archiving, we will be able to take good note of these changes and how they have occurred over time.
Thank you. Mboka works with My Gambia in the Gambia in terms of promotion, and they're going to be working with us with one of our biggest events that will be coming up in November 2024, which is going to be a salsa festival. Salsa is known in the Gambia. It's one of those hidden histories. A lot of Gambian musicians came out of Gambia. So if you'd like to know about that, one of our leads on the project, Joanne Joseph, who herself is of Cuban heritage. She's taken a lead on that and is helping us to do that. So please have a chat with her. So we'll please take a 20-minute break, cutting a break a little bit. And we have some great books there with This is Book Love. And also we have a Gambian publisher published with their own books, but they also sell Gambian authors as well. So please go and visit them and go and support them and come back in 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you for rejoining, and I know some new people have joined us. This is great. Now we are going to have a conversation around masquerade. And I've been using the general term of masquerade because I know it crosses so many borders and boundaries and continents and waters. That I hope you would understand, people will understand it just by that general term, but obviously there are different, people call it different, it has different names in different places. And we have got the 3 people we have on stage today discussing this. It's amazing. We couldn't expect or hope for a richer group of people to do this. Unfortunately, Hassoum Cissé, who from Gambia, was not able to join us, but we did see him in the last film. He is the historian and he is the Director General of the National Centre for Arts and Culture in the Gambia. He's a lovely person to work with. And his books, he does have some books that I think can be purchased in the UK as well, I think through Africa Books Collective. A very broad-minded person when he writes about the history, ensuring that he takes in all aspects of people in the history. So it's worth looking for. So I am just going to be here at the beginning to have the honour of introducing Professor Lucy Duran, another person who I hadn't met for a while. It's great to meet again. Lucy Duran is Professor of Music at SOAS. She specialises in the music of Mali and Cuba. She joined SOAS in 1993, where she established the first university courses in the UK on West African music, Cuban music and the kora. Her research on Mande music of West Africa dates back to the late 70s, when she went to Gambia to study the kora with leading kora player Amadou Bansang Jobarte. Her publications include pioneering work on Mali's women singers, on the music of the Wassoulou region, on possible connections between the Ngoni and the blues, and on the kora. Lucy Duran is currently editing 2 films shot on location. One is about the enigmatic masked figure known as Nama and its important relationship to sustaining agriculture and music in the Malian countryside. So just imagine when I'm giving you these bios, as I said, this is 1% of what they have done. She's an award-winning filmmaker, award-winning producer of music from the region as well. So I am just really totally honoured, and we should really be really pleased that she is here leading this discussion for us, bringing together these aspects of Masquerade to talk about. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Hello. Very nice to see you all here. I'm delighted to be chairing this panel, which is about Masquerade in the Gambia. We've been very honored to see some of the wonderful film by Malik Dieng, who's right here on my left, and we are also going to be talking to the fantastic sculptor Sokari Douglas Camp, who is, you will maybe have noticed when you come into this building, you see these incredible large heads of women, and also the same thing when you go into the main building. So Sokari Douglas Camp's work is very, very much part of SOAS. It's very much part of the environment, the experience of being in this building physically, and she's also an honorary fellow of SOAS. And we will, in a minute, we'll start out talking to Malik Dieng, whose film you just saw about Masquerade, but Malik will be telling us about his work here in London as well, for 13 years, curating Masquerade in East London, and it's called the Yaram Festival. So I'm very honored to be chairing this session with these 2 extraordinary artists, and I'll tell you a tiny bit more about them in a second. But I wanted to say something about my own involvement in Gambian culture, because it was in that building across the way that back in 1975, so nearly half a century ago, by chance, I heard a recording of the kora by a kora player called Jalinyama Suso. And that recording had been made in 1970. And at the time I was studying classical music and classical guitar. And when I heard the kora, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, and I was listening to the music of the spheres. And that was the beginning of my eternal fascination and love of kora music and Mande, Mandinka music, and the music of that whole region of Gambia, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, and Mali, which are all countries that I've spent a lot of time in. And I'm married in the Gambia and have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. So we have a very, very strong connection in my family with the Gambia. So just before we talk to Malik, I wanted to say something about masque and to differentiate masque from masquerade, because masks, as we all know, are the sort of the celebrated artifacts from Africa. So you go to the British Museum, or as I was a couple of months ago, you go to the Museum of Black Civilizations in Dakar, Senegal, and what do you see? You see lots of masks in showcases, but they are static. They're there. They're not moving. But as we've seen, masque is really, it's part of, it's masquerade. And the mask has a voice. The mask dances. The mask moves. The mask has power. The mask symbolizes something very important. The mask, as one of your informants said, is in control. It expresses social control. It's the thing that connects nature with culture. It's that mediates nature with culture, and the world. It mediates the world between animals and humans. It's ritual. It's powerful, and it's playful as well. So there are 2 Kankurangs, at least, that we, which there's the playful Kankurang, which you see in the daytime, and as you watch children playing with the Kankurang, and it sort of playfully pretends to be dangerous, but it's not really dangerous. But watch out for the other Kankurang. And in a little while we hear a recording of the dangerous, the powerful Kankurang, who's the one that makes sure that children stay at home or in the camp after they've been circumcised so that they heal properly. And that Kankurang is powerful, very powerful and dangerous, and you don't want to get near it. So, Malik, tell me about your involvement with Masquerade in general, and tell us something about your work here in London to represent Masquerade in East London.
Yeah, hello, good evening. Like you just explained about Masquerade, if I may just give a little background as well. Masquerades are at the heart of many African cultures, particularly from the West and Central Africa. A lot of people believe that when you build a mask, and there's going to be a spirit which will inhabit it. And for that matter, any person who wear that mask and a costume would possess the identity of that spirit. And this could be an ancestor, and it could well be a beast. So the whole story is like, for the longest of time, we live in UK, and we've been working in African arts, but mainly with musicians that we bring over and tour all over UK. But we realized that in terms of carnival arts, there isn't much. Although there's the element of the African element of the sort of West Indian traditions, which is beautiful, but we thought as well that we should probably, some of the stuff that we know happening in places like Gambia and by extension wider Senegambia, which we all grew up with when we were in Gambia, we can try to transplant those sort of things in UK. So the idea was you don't see anything like that. And then prior to 2010, that's when we really started this in earnest. Prior to that, a couple of decades earlier, there was a short-lived group that was led by one Uncle Brian. I think Professor Fall helped them. And they brought the Kankurang in East London. And it was so good, but then it didn't really sort of stay long, the organization. So like I say, I was working with the Arts Council, and we were mainly concentrated on sort of working with African musicians and artists and all whatnot. But we tend to see that the most popular carnival here in UK, whether it's the Notting Hill Carnival, or you don't see any sort of African carnival arts, and that was our motivation. So this is how, in 2010, we said, okay, let's start to bring this masquerade and introduce it in London. Luckily for us, like the three sort of most popular Gambian, Senegambian masquerades are the Kankurang, which we saw a film on, and the Kankurang, which represents the Mandinka culture, the hunting devil that represents the Creole people, and the Wolof Zimba lion. So we thought in 2010, let's just bring all of this to London. It will be a revelation. And we went to the festival, that was the Hackney One Carnival. They never saw anything like that. And everybody followed us in the street. So we brought all three masquerades, and then we started, that same year, we started the Yaram Masquerade Festival. So we were killing two birds with one stone. So we would still have the Gambian Community Festival, which is going strong now. It's the Gambian, Senegambian Festival, which is now at its 12th year.
Can I just interrupt you there for a second and ask you, what is the size of the Gambian community in London, do you know, or in the UK? Because we had that marvelous talk. By the way, that was such a wonderful presentation of your historical work. Fabulous.
Yes, and I'm going to quote him. I think he's the one who made that research as well. And if I'm right, I think it was about 30,000, wasn't it, Professor? Yeah? 36,000, yeah. Gambia born. And about 32,000 second generation. Okay.
Does that include my children?
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole, again, motivation is try to popularize these masquerades. Not now it is known in London, especially with the Gambian diaspora community. Everyone bring their children, and they never knew anything like this. Probably we may see some film, some excerpts from the last one. You will hear even children, how they look forward to this every year, year in, year out. And trying to mainstreamize this thing as well, going to a festival like Hackney Carnival. And last year we had funding from the Arts Council, and we started to take this thing to other sort of venues outside of England. So that's the whole sort of purpose. We want people to see this sort of authentic African carnival arts. Yes.
Were you going to show anything, or?
Yes, we will at some point. I don't know how much time we have, but I think we have the recordings that is already been loaded. So
what are the recordings?
Well, the tech guy, he's had it, but I think it should be after Sokari. I'm not too sure.
Oh,
what would be the running order?
Okay. I think Jerry, Jerry, hello, up there. You know, I mean, where would we be without our technical team? Thank you. Jerry, can you play the Kankurang recording? So before Jerry plays this, I want to explain, because, you know, we saw in that marvelous film that you've done, the Kankurang dancing, and we saw different types of Kankurang with different names and so on. The one that is called Ifam Bondi, that's the one that I remember. Ifam Bondi means to let yourself go, to take yourself out of your body, kind of thing. And in fact, it was the name of a very famous popular group from the Gambia, Ifam Bondi. First of all, they were called the Super Eagles, and then they changed their name to Ifam Bondi. And so in 1986, this shows you how long I've been hanging around that part of the world. I was in Brikama, which is an inland town. It's only about 25 or 30 kilometers from the capital. And in those days, it was more rural than it is now. And I was staying with some musician friends, Dembo Conte, who was the son of Bai Conte, a famous kora player. And it was late April, and that's the season when often boys are circumcised. And so in his house, in his compound, the boys had all come back from being in the bush, and they were all healing. And suddenly, late in the evening, we could hear this strange sound coming near us. And Dembo Conte, my host, said, get inside, close the door. Do not open the door. And I said, can I record it? This is very strange. What is it? And he said, it's Ifam Bondi. It's the Kankurang. And they are walking down all the streets because all the boys have been circumcised. And they're protecting the boys from evil spirits. But they have two big sabers, two big swords, which they crash against each other and sharpen them. And so you don't want to get anywhere near that Kankurang.
Yeah. Well, if staying with the Ifam Bondi, like you said, it's mainly to protect the word of evil when you have a group of young children who are on a retreat in the bush during circumcision ceremony. But it has other purposes. At times they can use it for kind of a therapeutic, when sort of, especially like some possessed kind of children or women, people facing sterility.
For healing.
Yes, so it could be healing. So as well, if the society or the community is going through sort of a bad period, let's say epidemic or something of that sort, the Ifam Bondi can still come out and then try to purge sort of the area. So it serves a lot of different other functions. And there are different Kankurangs as well. There's the Jambajeri.
Let me just play a bit of this recording that I made in 1986, and you will hear. Well, let's hear it. Just outside the house. So that's Ifam Bondi, the Kankurang, the real Kankurang, the dangerous Kankurang. And just after that, the Kankurang was on the roof. And I mean, I was genuinely frightened. And the idea is that sound, woo, that is actually a bull roarer. So you whip it around like that, and it makes that sound. It's a piece of string with a piece of wood or something like that on the end, and as it whirls through the air, you hear that makes that sound. And the bang, bang, bang. Those are the two sabers against each other, and then it's the Kankurang himself going woo, 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 woo. And we were all terrified.
Indeed, yes, and that should be that's the whole reason. That's the idea. Indeed. Yeah, yeah, and similarly, just like the Ifam Bondi, the other sort of masquerades as well, they are all similarly protective, like the Zimba lion, or that is the Wall of One, and the hunting devil, which is also sort of hunters. They all sort of imitate wild beasts, and they want to protect people mainly, protect against witchcraft, things like that. So it's similarly, they have more or less that commonality in all of them.
So Kari, can we talk to you? I know we're going to see something, but I would like to include you in this conversation because you are originally from the Calabar region of Nigeria.
No.
You're not?
No.
You were born there?
Calabar is a different area. That's Cross River State.
Oh.
I'm from Rivers State.
Oh.
And although it's Calabari that I am, it was a British mistake.
Oh, the British have made lots of mistakes.
We're different people.
Oh, all right.
Yes, I'm Kalabari with a K.
Kalabari with a K.
Yes. Yes.
Good. Well,
not from Calabar.
Okay, not from my mistake. I mixed up the C with a K. But so tell us about, because you're a multi-prize winning, multi-award winning person. You are a CBE, a Commander of the British Empire. You're a fellow, an honorary fellow of SOAS. Your work is exhibited all over the world. You are a very creative and original sculptor. So, but you also have worked in the Caribbean with this tradition called Jonkonnu or Junkanoo or there are various, pardon me, various ways of pronouncing it. But so just tell us about your work and explain a little bit about your interest in masquerade.
Okay. I'm interested in masquerade because masquerades are actually watched by women. We're not allowed to play masquerades in the part of Nigeria that I come from, and I think most of West Africa, women do not dress as these spirits. So, I'm very proud of the fact that I can be a critic because I'm the person watching, and it's like going and watching a play, I guess. But I'm interested in masquerades just because that was our theatre in the Niger Delta. And the whole village could come out to watch this fantastic performance.
Nigeria has, of course, very, very famous masquerades, including the masquerade about, the egungun around funerals and death, and it's particularly famous for its masks and its masquerades.
Yeah, but the thing to remember is that there's umpteen cultures in Nigeria, of course, and the Kalabari. I want to say that we're unique, but of course we're not. We're just West African. But I had a few slides that I wanted to show. I have about 5 slides that I wanted to show, just because it's quite important to have a visual image, just like you showing your film. But Kalabari masquerades, the things that I've learnt is that Kalabari masquerades, the mask is actually on top of the head. It's on top of the head just because I think they wanted to make the figure a totally different character, not a human figure as such. So the face isn't seen and the proportion of the body is changed. And I always found that fascinating as an artist. And there are instances where there are some masquerades that are mixed with animal as well, in the sense that we have a mask which is a hippo mask, and it's mixed with human and hippo have turned into one person, and it's worn flat on the head. And it's only when the dancer bends his head that you see his face. And the thing not to forget is that this thing has to do with religion as well. So the hippo masquerade talks directly to God. And so when he's in the arena playing, you don't really see his face. And most of the masquerades that I've come across in the Niger Delta are played during the day and by a special cult of men that do these performances. And I studied these guys in the 80s, which is showing my age. And some of them came to London to perform at the Africa Centre in 1987. And what was nice was that the Africa Centre was used as a shrine, and then these guys walked into the piazza and played there in the piazza of Covent Garden. So in studying these masquerades, I made about 8 sculptures. So they're about 8 feet in height, these structures, and sometimes they're shown in the British Museum, but I think some of them are in storage. But I think this one was around in the British Museum for a while. And all I can say is that I like the costume of these masquerades, so much so that I want to make them everlasting, like the marble statues that we have in museums all over the world. You want to kind of join that genre of being special. So this is Boat Masquerade with household on his head, and it's owned by the British Museum. And I have blood on the apron just because Kalabari masquerades, they sacrifice animals before the player dons this spirit, and it's becoming possessed by a spirit that makes the Kalabari performance. I don't know whether I should just go through the other images quickly. If I could show another image.
Can you?
Oh,
give us another image? Thank you.
Okay, so this business about Jonkonnu. Jonkonnu came about because of lockdown and missing the London Carnival, and I found this guy on the internet and was so surprised because it reminded me of the boat masquerade that I'd done, and yet this was from the 1700s and by an artist called Isaac Balsario, and he was painting slaves who were given a day or 3 days holiday a year in the Bahamas. And I suddenly realized that even though people had been made to travel because of the slave trade, they hadn't lost this essence, which is in West Africa, had been carried to the Caribbean and came out with something like this. And these characters would use the clothes of their owners or whatever, so much so that they'd even wear, frilly dresses and things to perform as a kinder spirit. And supposedly they joined clubs as well, so that the feathers and stuff mean certain things. I mean, I haven't researched it so much that I can give you details, but there are various clubs that the dancers joined, but the beauty is that even from cast-off clothing, they made something as wonderful as this to perform and celebrate their day of freedom as slaves. If you could give me the next image.
I just wanted to say there that I have read some research about Junkanoo or Jonkonnu. And I've read that actually it's a term that comes from Mandinka, and Jong means slave, or it also means a human being, because we are all the slaves of God. And Kanu means love, so it's the love of the enslaved, and it was a way of ostensibly it was for someone called Jonkonnu, but in fact what they were saying was we are enslaved, but we love ourselves. That's what I've read. I don't know whether you've heard about this, but I think this is a plausible explanation of the term Jonkonnu.
So that must have resonated somehow, just because the last watercolor is so strong and powerful. Anyway, my work seems to just take a little bit of heritage and mix things up a bit, and that seems to be how I came up with sugarcane Jonkonnu. And the idea is, it's that same headdress in the watercolor, except that I've chosen to put sugarcane on top of his head because people were forced to farm, plantations were created, and it's our British heritage, it's our colonial heritage, in that we like tea and we like sugar. And, you know, I enjoyed the general's jackets and things that I saw in these watercolours too. And I wanted to just spotlight the fact that it was the British Empire that made all of that to create this character that I was excited by, which is sugarcane Jonkonnu. And one more image, please. So that sugarcane piece is quite a small sculpture. This is near 10 feet in height, but again, it's the British flag, and I work mainly in metal, and so I just wanted to keep to the purity of that, but I also wanted to emphasize that a lot of the things that we accept as British culture are so far away, and it amuses me that, you know, when you are in a panic or, you know, people just want to care for you here, they will give you a cup of tea. So I, you know, have all these logos on it because I guess I wanted to emphasize the house sculpture on the watercolor that I saw by Balsario. And next image. Sorry. This is a piece called Ruffle Jonkonnu. It's a fluid piece in that, you know, just because it's a man doesn't mean that he can't wear a dress. And just like the sculptors, or the people from your part of the world that have the raffia. Yeah. So it's that kind of illusion, that kind of change of personality that I enjoyed very much with the little bit of research that I did. So this is Ruffle Jonkonnu. You can see layers of influence in that, you know, you even have a little bit of Venetian masquerade business about it as well, just because, you know, people get influenced by all sorts of experiences. And I'll have another slide, please, if you don't mind. The last one, I think this is. Yeah. So I made these large structures that were shown in the summer outside the Design Museum, and it's more Jonkonnu characters, and they are. This is a tossling Jonkonnu, just because they fought with the British flag and ripped it in two. But, you know, they still stand with their Tetley tea, Yorkshire tea, and all the other teas that make us the nation that we are.
And I was just going to say there's another variation of Junkanoo that I'm aware of. In the Bahamas, there's a carnival that is celebrated during Christmas period, and it's named Jonkonnu, and they use brass music, and the sort of costume that they wear is similar that you can find. Similarly, you can find it in Ghana, parts of Ghana, but they call it fancy dress party. But then there's a big connection. It's exactly what they are doing in Ghana and the Bahamas, and in Ghana they hold it during the New Year's period. So I'm not sure whether that has any kind of intersection with this year Junkanoo.
But we need to remember that it's not just because of retention of and recreation of African heritage in the Caribbean, but it's also because there was many enslaved people from the Caribbean were returned to Africa, were set free and returned to Africa, and like the Aku in the Gambia, who are of Yoruba origin supposedly. But you know, there's and in Ghana as well. So there's many, and there's kinds of music like gumbe, kumbe, and all of that kind of things. So there's a huge amount of circulation of and you know, we mustn't think of it as you know, the Kankurang only comes from one part of the world and that kind of thing. There's so much circulation of culture.
Well, yes, I mean, you know, even in especially in West Africa, because I think we have a masquerade called Alagba, and it starts off our masquerade season. But I've met, Yoruba folk in London who've said to me, but we have a masquerade that's Alagba. And I'm thinking, well, of course people travelled. Yeah. So without question, influences pass around and ideas get passed around. But our masquerade season is 17 years long. So the characters that come over the 17-year period are all different, and they have a kind of fancy time when they are sent back after the 17th year, and all the masquerades that have played come out to play in one kind of big occasion, and then some of them actually go to the coast and will take off their costumes and let it drift away, because we really do believe that these are spirits that have played for us.
Extraordinary creativity, and I think masquerade and its connection with the spirit world is so important. But it's I would like to. You're going to show your film now, is that right?
Yes.
Could I show my little bit of my 2 minutes of the Nama? The Nama is a masquerade that's performed in the Malinka, or the French say Malinke, region of Western Mali and Eastern Guinea. And the Nama there are two great masquerades around agriculture. One of them is the Nama, the Nama means hyena, and the hyena represents, ironically, the strongest farmer of the year. So when they're planting and sowing, the Nama comes out to dance. And then when they're harvesting, it's the Chiwara, which you might have seen. It's like the symbol of, the national symbol of Mali. But this is a film that I made in 2009 in a small village up near Kita in Western Mali, featuring the Nama. That's on YouTube. If you want to watch the rest of the film, it's called Bako Dagnon, The Voice of Tradition. And that mask is at least 100 years, was in 2009 was 100 years old. So, will you share your film with us?
Yes, if the tech guy is happy to.
Do you want to just introduce it, please?
Okay, these films, they're excerpts from our Yaram Masquerade Festival that we hold annually at Newham. and then a bit as well on the Hackney One Carnival Street Festival. It's a bit of about 6 sort of different videos, so you have to kind of fast forward, maybe give a minute of each. I think that should be fine. Oh, no, say, okay then. Okay, Kadja, that's fine.
Are we running out of time?
Okay. Oh, that's the devil.
Ajade Junkanoo, Ajade Eji, Ajade Victor, Ashiba Brahma Jibril, Ashiba Nyanya, Ashiba Edi, Ashiba Midu, Olukotu Fayi Baba Lambe, Olukotu Junior. Ebosode Ebode, Atijade Atibode Atibologu, Eya Fomo Ebosode, Nijo, Supako Lejesa. Adakure Shaworo Made Nijo Super Colleges Eya Fomo Ebosode Atijade Atibode Atibologu Ogunde Afomo Diaspora Atibode Atibologu Afomo Diaspora The voice of Piman Izagi Ile Izagi Lego Med mix on the beat.
If it weren't for the trees, I wouldn't think I was in London.
Yes, interestingly, this is Gambian culture, but it's of Yoruba origins. But it's been adopted by the Creole people who started from Sierra Leone and the Gambian Creole people.
Aku.
The Aku, yeah. But they like to be called Creole, K-R-I-O, instead of C-R-E-O-L-E. It's different.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a C and a K,
yeah.
as we've just found. Well, I think it's time. I don't know how we're doing for time. Can we have some questions?
We will have probably one question.
One question.
It's got to be a hot question because we've got such an amazing finale for you. We don't want you to sneak out and go home before you.
We've got the real thing.
We have.
On stage, live.
He's already scared some of us out there. So
I hope he doesn't have sabers.
No, even his face is just, looks like a saber. Thank you for that conversation. It was really enriching. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Sokari. Thank you, Malik.
Thank you.
And make sure you follow their marvelous work.
Yes, I put. If you look on the back, there's Instagram. There should be Instagram addresses on there. Or did that? Yes, Instagram addresses are on the bottom, so you can follow everybody's work there. Yes, and also you can buy Sakari's catalogue outside. It's get them while you can because they will soon be gone. So you get them there. So yes, she will sign it. She will sign it for you. And also we'll join the Yaram Festival in Newham in 28th of August. Well, is it the Sunday or the Monday?
Yeah, Sunday 27th. It's
Carnival
weekend, 27 August. Yeah.
August. Yeah. Any burning questions? Lady with the green cardigan. Okay, and then I'll take one and two. I'll take two questions there, and then Isis. I'll take Isis' question.
Hi, thanks so much for the really interesting presentation to the two presenters. I was in particular curious about the discussion of Jonkonnu because I'm from Jamaica, as you might be able to hear. But at home, so Junkanoo started really as a way for the slaves to make fun of the slave master without him knowing. So I was just wondering if we carry on the tradition today, but it is dying out a bit, unfortunately, but we're trying to keep it alive. And I was wondering if there's sort of any of those same sort of elements of social commentary with the other masquerades that were discussed from either the Gambia or Nigeria or anywhere else that you're aware of, because I believe that the persons that came to Jamaica, to the Caribbean, I should say, as enslaved people, they came from various parts of West Africa and sort of mixed their traditions in a way of resisting, right, the domination that was being imposed upon them. So I'm just curious as to whether or not that sort of element of rebellion and resistance or, social commentary was carried along with the aesthetic.
Yeah, shouting. The Gelede Yoruba masquerade mocks the very, very powerful market women in Lagos City. That's all I know. They even go to the extent of having exaggerated bums and things. And it was their sons doing this as commentary against their powerful mothers. Yeah.
Isis, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about. So I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, my friend, but we obviously have the Ifa tradition there. We have Igungung. It's something that we have. And then I'm initiated in Benin. And what I find fascinating in Benin is not only, of course, they have a very similar thing, the Igungung there, but the Zembeto. I don't know if you know about this, if you've done any research into it. They look almost like tents, and they've got the raffia on them. And they move around like kind of whirling. But an interesting thing about them, when you turn them over, there's no one inside. You might find a duck or a chicken. And there's a whole mystery about this. And if anybody's looked into that, because I've danced with an Igungung in Benin, like kind of playing with it, but I've always found the Zembetas really interesting things, and I just wondered, I don't know about it anywhere else in the world apart from in Benin. Just wondering.
Well, that's why it's called a masquerade. The mystery of it. Typically within, I'm sorry, my name is Alex. I like, thank you very much for the presentation. The type of masquerade you are describing, I think is the type of...
It's an ancestral.
Yes, it's a sort of ancestral. People think, usually, they have these disappearing qualities that at times you don't even believe, because of the mysticism, you don't believe that actually is being manipulated. But it's one of the highest form of puppetry. One of the highest form of puppetry, and that, of course, it's a human being that is inside. But we are here discussing this. It's sacrilegious that I'm saying this here, because these are the things that you're not. It is, we are not supposed to talk about. The whole mystery is that it is there. And what else do you see? You see a chicken. That's why it's called the masquerade. For us to, it will take academics like this to explain things like that. But by doing that, you are actually removing that Africa that makes it what it is.
But sometimes, we don't need to explain it. I'm just throwing this in because I'm going to be doing a speculative fiction festival, a Black Speculative Fiction Festival in November, I hope. And we just want to even bring this in because a lot of our stories, what we call speculative fiction, what we call myths, it all comes out from stories like this. And it's not explained just because it's part of our lives, So, and like magic realism, is it what is magic realism? Again, it's something that we have, but we can't really explain. And sometimes you think, does it need to be explained?
For everyone here, you might try to check a masquerade called Ebu, E-B-U, Ebu Wonder. And it's called Wonder because this masquerade comes out from the box. You see them, they carry they carry the whole box. They put it down, and you see masquerade dancing, and the next thing you see, people are sitting on ordinary cloth. They are sitting on ordinary cloth that this masquerade, it can goes about 10 or 15 meters up and just turns to ordinary cloth. How does that happen? So it's the type of masquerade that you might like to bring here to, to explain what is the science behind it,
Look at the Kumpo that you saw. Yeah. Kumpo is extraordinary. And the word Kumpo in Mandinka means curiosity, something strange and mysterious. It's really hard to see how any human being could turn around like that. And that's the power. That's the power of masquerade. It's a very powerful medium of expression. And I think perhaps on that note, we need to finish this part and have an example of the power of expression of masquerade. So
please,
so thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Could you really imagine having such three powerful people on the stage discussing this? I couldn't. Thank you so much. No, really, you all brought something different, but something really rich to the discussion, something very varied. So I think we all got so much from this. So we are going to finish. We're going to have a finale. Thank you, Lucy. They are going to have a finale with Moulay Dialon, Zimba Lion, masquerade artist. So we're just going to give him enough space. And I was going to ask Malik if we need to give any more context to him, or I won't even call him context to let him just come and do his thing. Let me just go do his thing. Yes. So while he was doing that, so please don't forget to check out what we're doing with Mboka throughout the year, and also with the other hidden series. You have to do it now. Okay.
So we'd like to thank everybody for attending this event put on by a small group of us, women, I have to emphasise that. Yes, please clap. Sisters are doing it.
Not only for themselves, but for everyone.
Yeah. We will be having... Fazana, I've left my glasses down there, so I can't read this. We're having our next Hidden Histories... Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Our next Hidden Histories event will be on the 30th of May. It will be in the lecture theatre in the main building, starting at 5:30, and it's going to be... the title is Losing Home, Finding Home, and it's 75 years after the partition of India, and who owns the narrative of the Hindu Sindhis. So please, 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 not only attend this, but share and spread the word. And as I said right at the beginning, history belongs to all peoples of the world. All peoples of the world are important, and his stories and her stories of all peoples of the world are important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So please, make sure he comes on strongly. I keep saying him, but it could be a woman underneath there. Who knows? Moulay Dialon, Zimba Lion.
Muhammad wa ala Muhammad sakaja makaja burja siken jarati man bidi na itamori satiti mori tamori wa bidi bidi wa badak badak wa bantum bantum wala rakum bantum yow njaay man njaay yow daaba man daaba sa daaba du laal moromu daabaam
Jason Fay Baye Fallu sayo tege giwlen salal Muhammad walal Muhammad di kundaku danda sore asalo Fay yo gay ne fi nga japp nak bayil mu bom bu ko fatti yow bayil mu bom bu ko gañ bayil mu bom yola mon ko yow bayil mu bom yow mo na yow ga jang ak sapul gay ne ñay ñolal dafa am fecc bu bees tak mi ngi tudd sikulu sa ñaari loxo ci kanam nga mel ni ku witt mango sa mi ngi ci ginnaaw ngay biiju di biiju kaay feccal sikulu feccal sikulu ay la neexee fecc say la neexee Hey!
Thank you so much for sharing this evening with us. Your Excellency, once again, thank you for sharing your evening with us. It's absolutely wonderful to share it with everybody. The vibe is wonderful. I've got one last favour. Please fill out. There are some forms on the table, or you may have one with you. Dorothy, I might have given one to you, just to let us know your comments on the evening. That would be really great. I would really appreciate it because it helps us know what to do next time and better next time. So have a wonderful weekend, everybody. This is bank holiday.
Being a fantastic audience.
Yeah, very fantastic day. It was very warm in here and very varied. Thank you very much. Thank you all and good night.